Oh, so the first one's a fun one. How we first met.
Oh my gosh. First of all, it's a joy to be with you.
Same.
It always is. And, it's been a great opportunity to reflect on our friendship and your time at Villanova and with the Augustinians. And I was thinking about the first time we met, and I think we were both newbies. You might have been a sophomore?
Freshman.
You were a freshman,
Yeah.
and I was a new priest
Yep.
on campus. And I, found my way over to chaplain with the basketball team and work in the athletics department. And I know you were a player in high school. You obviously looked like you were on the team, and you were on the team. And then, you were just doing all this work behind the scenes. And you were a manager, right?
Mm-hmm.
You served as a manager. And then the next thing you know, we kind of took our spots on the end of the bench together
Mm-hmm.
for years. And so I just remember how hard you worked.
Oh.
And how much you had to juggle. I don't think people really think about that in terms of the managers. Everybody thinks about the players. But the time that you were putting in. And then, Villanova's no joke academically, right? So you were getting it done in the classroom and working so hard behind the scenes of the program. And then you just had this real joyful disposition. That's what I remember most about you.
Thank you.
So I wasn't surprised that, later on you kind of found your way into this side of the camera, if you will, because you just kind of radiated a joy from the first minute I met you.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's funny. I look back at 18-year-old me, and I'm like, oh boy, what do people remember? Billy Lang, obviously head coach of St. Joe's right now, remembers he called me aloof, distant, because there's so much going on.
Yeah.
My recollection of you, our former team chaplain was much quieter, much more reserved. When you came in about 2 months into my time as a student manager, it was very clear to me and to everyone else, your energy was different. You could relate to us, which is a feat because we had, I come from New Egypt, New Jersey, but you got Randy Foy coming from Newark. You got Jason Frazier coming from Amityville, New York.
Right.
And you're able to relate to all different kinds of life experiences. And you were a fan of basketball.
Yeah.
Which I thought was really interesting. So it was engaging every single time you'd get up before dinner or before a meal and speak to us. And one thing that's gratifying too is it set off my journey as a freshman at Villanova, Catholic institution, an Augustinian institution, of what I should come to expect from men in the cloth. And that is somebody who you can have a personal relationship, you can tell anything to, and it's not like there's one, generic relationship you can have or friendship you can have. You're a great example in my life. You married me later on. You've consoled me at a time of grief. So no, it's a wonderful thing to during my freshman year to have met somebody that's really set the tone for the way I should be in life, and also the friendships that I could come to expect.
No, you hit on all the buzzwords that really make it what our Augustinian life is all about. It's about friendship. It's about relationship. It's about walking through life together.
Mm-hmm.
And so, with the various, schools and ministries that we have, to have an opportunity to build friendships, and lasting friendships, that we were talking with the camera guys this morning about, it was probably, 20 plus years ago that we met.
Yep.
And so, fast forward to have watched you, become the man that you are, as a husband, as a father, as a professional, as a servant leader in our community, to watch you overcome some real hardship that you've overcome in your life with faith and resilience. I think that's really what it's all about. And, you think about all your classmates and, Christina, we saw, she came out to celebrate Mike's first win as interim coach. And I know you guys have stayed close over the years, Randy Foy. And I think that's what really we take pride in the most, is that there is a kind of a bond, if you will. We talk about our fraternity as Augustinians, but it's certainly a fraternity, a sorority, a community. Mm-hmm. Where, people have a sense of belonging, people feel that they're seen and heard, and, to bond with the people that we get to work with and become friends with, There's no better, nothing better.
Well, that's one thing I experienced at that Profile in Leadership too, is the first time I saw everyone together.
Yeah.
And as you know, in life, and as I've come to learn from you, and basketball certainly, is it takes a village. It's not like one person paves their own way and becomes successful alone.
Yeah.
It always takes the people in their life that have helped them along the way, that they emulate.
Yeah.
That's always been incredibly beneficial to me. So I can say that it's been wonderful watching your ascension, and not so much even role-wise. I mean, I think it's just the way people see you and the way people talk about you. I literally had somebody pull me and my wife aside in Ambler Saturday saying, "Oh, Father Rob, let me tell you about Father Rob," and talked all about how wonderful a guy you were. Wow. And they knew you before, which was kind of cool too.
The before. Yeah.
Well, I have to say before, which is great. But no, but it's that kind of impact that, like, when I think about my life, it's like I hope people talk about me like that. You know what I mean? It's like, hey, not what I do for a living or something, but who I am and what I mean to people. And I think I learned that during my 4 years here at Villanova, and it only, grew from there because I had great role models.
Yeah, the same thing happened to me. I mean, I'm obviously ahead of you in terms of time at Villanova and things like that. But I think in some ways our experiences were similar. I was a sophomore on campus when Villanova won their first national championship with Rowley and Eddie Pinckney and Dwayne McClain and those guys. And I can remember just feeling as a sophomore just inspired by this kind of small group of believers that anything is possible when you work together and believe in one another, and to see Jay kind of grab that as kind of having Rowley as one of his mentors, and then kind of reinstill that in his program as we came into it, and then to see them kind of do that again.
And there were some tough years too. That's the thing, people love to overlook that.
Always.
They like to think, he was always successful. It's like, no, there was a lot of adversity.
You hop right to Easter Sunday, you skip right over Good Friday.
That's right, exactly. Take some bumps along the way, you learn from it, and you grow closer as a family because of that.
Yeah. And then, when you meet people, the same thing happens in their own life, where there was adversity or a failure or a breakup or a setback, or I didn't get the promotion, or I was passed over for something. And to, have that reservoir of experience that says, this isn't the end of the world. And there were good people who stuck by me, and I learned from the experience, and I overcame it, And now, to be on a campus where there's a whole nother generation of kids with whatever they're going through in this crazy, uncertain world, to remind them that, I think that's a challenge, and you lived it, as a student athlete, there's so much coming at you. There's so many other voices. There's so many other things going on socially, social media, academically. There's a lot of high achievers here. So everybody wants to excel at everything. And we used to say, you can't be anything if you want to be everything. And I think, the Augustinians, we try to instill those values that are kind of competing with some of the worldly values, right? That say, you got to get yours, and, success means you got to have the most money, or you got to win every game.
Yeah.
And then to come at them with, veritas unitas caritas, what's your truth? Are you living your truth? Are you being true to yourself? To run your own race. To stick together, not just in the good times, but through the hard times, and unitas. And we heard you speak so eloquently, back at the leadership event about what veritas unitas caritas means to you. And as Augustinians, that really warms our hearts to see people come here and, in the face of everything else that they could be chasing in life, to embrace those values. And that's very Augustinian, because Augustine chased it too. He chased everything that we chase. But he came to the conclusion that it kind of it's like drinking salt water. It just makes you thirstier.
Interesting.
And so, he kind of came to this conclusion that, Lord, you've made us for yourself, and our hearts are restless until they rest in you. And I'm maybe not going to pursue all these other things that are competing for my love, my time, my attention. And I'm going to focus on things that really give me meaning and purpose in my life. And to watch you do that, with your beautiful wife and your beautiful son, and the community that you work in, and the relationships that you still have with your teammates, and at Villanova and in the Delaware Valley, I think, to be able to say, that's really what makes life meaningful.
Right, right. Use the great word is chasing.
Yeah.
I remember, approaching that speech and trying to appropriate, okay, unitas, veritas, caritas, like what does it mean to me? And I think it's an evolution. I think it's like, if you were to ask me that question at 18 years old, my answer would have been different than when I was 28
right.
and when I was 38. And I think it's continuing to be refined. And maybe it's a good thing that it continues to evolve. Like, that's one thing that I kept thinking about during the speech is like, and a funny thing too is, I'm thinking, I'm thinking like a TV news person where it's like, I'm giving a speech, I want the audience to be engaged and to react. And I'm resisting that urge because I'm thinking, wait, that's not my truth then. But then I thought to myself, maybe this chasing is a good thing, because you continue to then search for, what is my truth? It's like, what do I love and how do I love, which I think is like insanely important. And then who is my community and what am I to my community?
Yeah.
I think it's a really healthy thing to continue to ask those questions.
Yeah, I agree. And I think it's easy not to because we get distracted.
Yeah.
And I'm grateful for, the Augustinians that have gone long before me who pose that questions and kind of hand that mantle off to us. And as we search for, what we would call new discerners who want to join us, but not necessarily, we'd love for men to join us and put the habit on and become friars. But I think it's important now to realize that we need to partner with all people. That whether you put the habit on or not, you can share our Augustinian heart. And that pursuit of truth, to discover the value of friendship, to stop chasing those things that we all kind of sometimes waste our time with. It's like you said, that never gets old, no matter what chapter in life that we're in. And to partner with people who are about that and want to promote that, I think is a way that keeps the Augustinian charism, the Augustinian spirit alive.
I was going to ask you this to get back to this page here. If you can't, tell me about becoming familiar with the Augustinian charism.
How would one become familiar with it? I mean, a lot of people meet Augustine, the man. Much has been written about him. His story, I think what resonates with a lot of people is that he was a sinner before a saint. So who can't relate to that?
Right.
Who hasn't failed at something? Who hasn't made a mistake? Who hasn't, put a lot of attention into something that maybe wasn't worth that attention? And so a lot of people can relate to Augustine. He's very accessible. In the digital world now, websites, social media, articles, Augustinian scholars. And so I think when people discover either something he wrote or certainly some preaching of his, to hear someone comment about his life, what happens is you start to reflect on your own life. And so for Augustine, a good way to pray was, as he reflected on his life, the good, the bad, and the ugly, he came to ask himself the question, where was God in my story? Where was God when I was, stealing those pears? Where was God when I was, kind of running away from my truth? Where was God when I needed forgiveness? And what he came to the realization, he came to realize was that God was there the whole time. And so he wrote this wonderful work called The Confessions of St. Augustine. And a lot of people think it's a confession of all the sins and all the bad stuff he did, which in some ways it kind of is. But in reality, the Confessions of St. Augustine is really a confession of praise. That through it all, through the darkness, through the missteps, through the failures, that God was there the whole time to pick him up, to forgive him, to give him grace. And so it's a confession of praise and thanksgiving. And so a core value for an Augustinian and those of us that are kind of walking down that Augustinian spirit of life is to live with gratitude. And we've talked about this before. It's so easy, whether you're in college or you're working or just wherever you find yourself in life, it's so easy to point to the things that you want to complain about.
Yeah.
Or that somebody else has that you don't have.
Yep.
And it's just as easy to say, well, wait a minute, look what I do have. Look at the people in my life. Look what I have that maybe somebody else doesn't have. And then how can I share it with somebody else? And it's a great pathway out of your own funk, is to be grateful for what you have, to get out of the comparison game, right? And to start to say, how can I make somebody else's life better? It makes your life better.
Sure it does.
When you try to help somebody else.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah,
I always felt that like heaping praise is kind of like, it helps you out in the end. It's a, what's the word for it? Like high tide raises all ships.
Yeah.
It's one of the things at Villanova I learned really quickly was like, hey, I could be successful in and of, whatever I try to do and work really hard. It's a whole nother thing when everyone around me accomplishes a goal.
So true.
As a team. That's wonderful. I'm curious, I'm listening to you talk, and maybe this is related. When you were a teenager, did you see this for yourself?
That's so funny. I did not. I really didn't. I had my own plan, much like Augustine. I'm going to do my thing.
Everyone does,
yeah. And so, it's that funny line, if you want to make God laugh, tell me your plans.
That's a good thing.
And so I had plans. I was going to go to, Villanova, and I was going to work my way through, and I was going to go to law school, and I was going to be a lawyer, and I was going to make some money, and I was going to date, and I got to do all those things. And then I thought to myself, well, is this really what he wants me to do? And so I started to kind of go down this road. I mean, I was into my 30s.
Right.
And I was in the practice, and I was making some money, and I was dating, a beautiful girl at the time. And I remember I had won a case. I've told this story before, but I had won this case, and I was really feeling good about myself. It was a case we worked on for about 2 years, and it was really involved, and we got the positive result. And I came home, and it was 7 o'clock, and I had a steak, and I had a beer. I was just enjoying it.
Celebratory.
And Jeopardy was on. And so I was watching Jeopardy, and Alex Trebek, says to the contestant, authored the phrase, "Give me chastity, but not yet." And the contestant says, "Who was St. Augustine for 200?"
Wow, this is a movie.
And I thought, I can't get away from this guy. Here I am in one of the most satisfying nights of my professional life, and I'm thinking back to this Augustinian. And what am I chasing? And am I chasing the right things? And so that was kind of a aha moment for myself. And it wasn't long after that I reflected a little bit deeper and wound up leaving the law firm. And a lot of things that I thought were everything that I was working for. And, had to go, back to school and Augustinian formation. And
it's a huge
it was
decision.
A big shift.
It's a hard shift. Yeah.
It was a shift.
Wow.
But I will say, no regrets.
Good.
It's been fulfilling. Are there challenging days? Like in any life,
Ending. Yeah.
But joy, the opportunity to meet people, to work with people, to walk with people in their journey with God.
Yeah.
It's been. I would recommend it to anybody who felt called to it.
Yeah. The fact that you felt that call in your 30s, do you think it gives you a different sensibility?
Yeah, I do. I think I was allowed to. Kind of chase, if you will.
Yeah.
And I think as I meet people who are discerning, that I would say, in a lot of cases, to be patient. Mm-hmm. I think sometimes we all want it now, and we want to decide everything now. And I don't think there's anything wrong with, letting it bake a little bit, And so I do believe that, if God is calling you, that call is going to be there. Now, eventually, we have to decide. Mm-hmm. And so indecision and procrastination for too long is not always a good thing. But I think allowing yourself to really discern and reflect, talk to people. I would run it by people, occasionally, And when I finally did decide, the people that really knew me were not surprised, And it was, I think a lot of times in a decision, the anticipation leading up to the decision is actually harder than actually doing it.
Than actually doing the act.
Yeah,
Yep.
yeah.
100%.
You know?
Yeah, and it could be exciting doing that next chapter too, which is interesting. See, I mentioned the sensibility part because that's what I experienced from you when I was at Villanova was, again, it's hard to relate to everyone's life experience, but somehow you were able to kind of capture our attention in those moments. And sometimes it was like, man, I was tired and bleary-eyed and who knows what me and the managers did the night before for on the road. You know what I mean? And, and then we'd sit down to break bread with everyone and you'd get up and speak and everyone would be just raptured by what you were saying. And it's because you were able to relate to us. And it was clear too, you were listening to us.
Yeah.
Like you were aware of what our stresses were. You were aware of where we were in the season, whether a loss had affected us one way or another, or a rocky plane flight, or really though, you know, and that's really important to be able to relate to life experience rather than to just, try to connect to us in another way through the Bible or through, something that isn't as personal.
It's so great that you mentioned that because I think that is a wonderful, underappreciated value, and that is listening, right?
Mm-hmm.
When you meet somebody that actually is paying attention to what you're saying and not rushing to the next thing that they want to say.
Right.
And I can remember, I worked my way through Villanova as well, and I worked as a bartender through Villanova and law school. So I bartended for 7 years.
Here? Wait, so where?
At a place called Bennigan's in Springfield.
Really?
Yeah,
That's great.
And it was kind of like Cheers, if you remember the show. It was just kind of like this neighborhood place where like a lot of people came in and you got to know everybody and you knew what they drank and this and that.
That's cool.
But my buddies and I would kid because I would say like, I think I heard more confessions there than I ever did as a priest. And it was just this appreciation that I came to that people really value being listened to.
Yeah.
Just be quiet. And that's why I will say to people who are discerning or maybe they're going to go into chaplaincy or a new ministry. And I think, that is kind of an Augustinian value is you don't have to be the expert.
Mm-hmm.
You don't have to know all the answers. You don't have to have all the wisdom. Listening is something anybody can do.
Yeah.
And sometimes a person just they don't need you to give them the answer. They need an opportunity to share their story, to vent, to get it out. And in the process, they find some clarity just by your silence.
Yep. Yeah.
And your attentive silence.
So I can tell a story when it comes to you too, in relation to that. So in 2016, my late girlfriend got into a car accident, as you know, on Route 55 in South Jersey. And I was on the phone with her at the time. And she ended up getting flown to Cooper University Hospital. I made calls around the state police barracks, finally found out where she was, drove there and spent a week in the hospital on the floor. And in that week, I was talking with close friends and family, and I started to recognize that nobody had an answer that satisfied me, nor was there one. And you know that in hindsight. But I spoke with you twice. 2 times you came to the hospital. The first time you told me to just tread water. And I thought that was extremely, extremely helpful. And it sounds so silly and so simple. You didn't have any kind of platitude you gave me. You didn't try to solve my problem. There was no solving it. But it taught me a really, really important lesson. And obviously the second time you came, you read my late girlfriend her last rites, which was very meaningful to my family. But you said in that moment to us, which was something we carried with us everywhere, which was, it's not the years in your life that count, it's the life in your years. And she was only 24 when she passed. And it's something that made us feel a little better about what had happened because it's unexplainable and it's not fair. And just like you said, you look for God in that moment and you go, where were you then? But then you hear something like that and you go, oh, you were here all along. If you think about the 24 years she lived, she packed an awful lot into it. And you start to, as you said, be grateful that I got to spend the last 2 years with her. Like that's a really, really special thing that I'll cherish for the rest of my life. And it advises now any friendship or relationship that I have that they could be finite, that tomorrow's not a given, but to reflect the way, to share what you did and reflect that way, and thinking, hey, it's like what we pack into our days that's more important than, getting to the end of the tunnel.
No, I me and anybody that knows you, Keith, I mean, there's just so much respect for the resilience that you possess and your ability to move forward. And I think, that there is something that comes with that, and that is empathy. And there's a concept in theology called the wounded healer. And I think when somebody like you goes through what you went through, and nobody can describe it or know what that feels like, I think when you go through that depth and you make it through best as you're able, it gives you a capacity to kind of understand and relate to other people who might be suffering in front of you. And I think,
Sure.
It just not being an outsider as you look at, the profession that you're in, there's a certain, I think, like authenticity and genuineness that you have about, when you talk to somebody or you interview somebody or you cover a piece. And I just think that you can't teach that. I don't think you can fake that. I think it's just part of who you are.
Oh.
And, I think that to be able to carry on and use that scar in a way that helps you relate to people is a gift, one of your great gifts.
Thank you. Thank you. That's very nice of you to say. Let me see if we can get back to this. This is a good question. So it says, this is for me. After I graduated, did you keep in touch with Augustinians? Who and how? How did you begin to see Augustinian charism manifesting in your life? Oh, that's interesting. You're the Augustinian I kept in touch with all the years after I graduated. It's funny, when I reflect back on Augustinian values in my life, I think Villanova and any Catholic education kind of builds a great foundation. But I think it's up to the person then to earn their understanding of what these values are in their lives, based on adversity that you face, the different chapters in your life. Much like I said earlier, it's like to answer the question, what is my veritas, unitas, and caritas at 18 years old? It would have been different at 28, at 38. And I think, through losing my late girlfriend, through getting married and having a son, it's like even reflecting on the last year, before my son was born and now, I feel like a changed person, that I understand a little bit deeper what it is to carry and own Augustinian values. And I think it also helps to knowing somebody like you and to emulate the way you treat people and who you are and the way people talk about you. I had the great fortune of following the Villanova basketball team after I graduated in a journalism capacity. 2009 I was in Virginia, so I didn't cover that, but that was the Final Four year there. But basically from 2013 on or 2014 on, I think we had a tough year. One of those years was a tough year. I was covering pretty much the tournament every single year. So I got to see the maturation of not only the team, but also to see the people that were still part of it from when I was there, that were still preaching the same stuff.
Yeah.
No matter the wins or the losses, it was still family. I mean, Coach Wright was famous for family and attitude, and I still saw the same culture. And it was really nice to see the evolution. The players could change, the faces could change, the plays and the play style can change, but there are certain things that remain the same. And for me, being able to, have that different view of things, not being, embedded in the program then, but to be a member of it, but on the outside, was really fascinating for me. And to see your maturation too. It's like, just as you said, it's grueling to be a student manager. It is grueling to serve your role for all the years that you have, basically getting on 30, 40 flights a year and being all over the place. And I still don't know how you, how you manage anything with your schedule.
It's a juggle, but there is joy in it, as you know. And, we talked about some of the hard times, but there's a lot of joy, right? To come back many years later and celebrate a wedding with, you and Holly and your beautiful parents.
Thanks.
And all the fraternity of managers come back, and you're hearing stories that you didn't even know were going on back in the day. Yeah. And then players come back, and everybody's older. Of course, the Friars look older. He still looks like he's in college.
Stop. It's not true.
And then fast forward to celebrate, baptisms and games. It's really the salt and light of life, to keep that community of friendship alive. And we're so grateful that you remain part of our community. and support our values and help us promote our way of life, which is important to us. And so there's a lot of gratitude on our end for what you do for us.
Thank you. Well, I get just as much from it. I'm continuing to learn and grow and evolve, and I benefit from being part of the community. In your crazy schedule, do you have time to do you, like to be you?
Yeah, thank God. You know, I've got good friends. I'd still like to run, you know, as long as my knees are holding up. You know, I still like to run, listen to some music.
What music?
All kinds.
Good.
You
Yeah,
know,
yeah.
It's funny.
That's the beautiful thing about being around the basketball
exactly.
team.
Thank you.
Yeah.
You know, I guess I would be a classic rock guy, but you know, you're around these teams,
Yeah.
and so you know what? There's some rap that's fun.
Of course.
There's oldies that's fun. You know, new country. So I will listen to all genres. You know,
That's great.
I love piano, just even without lyrics, just you know, just keyboard, just put it on in the background.
Yeah.
And relax.
Do you play?
No, I
Okay.
wish. But play some bad golf, you know, with some
Yeah.
friends. So fortunately, yeah, find some ways to just unplug, which is healthy, and
Yeah.
you know, everybody needs from time to time.
I was worried about that reaching out to you, because every time I reached out to you, I was like, oh man, it's like I need something every time, and I'm like, oh, I wonder if you get that all the time, or have people feel that way.
No, but you've you know, like you'll say, hey, do you want to meet for dinner? And I can remember last time we had dinner. I mean, how relaxing was that?
It was great.
It was just nice.
It was like a
meal
3-4 hour dinner.
Exactly.
It was great.
Solve all the world's problems.
Yeah,
you
of
know,
course,
and,
of course.
And so to be able to do that is a great joy.
Yeah, it's wonderful.
Yeah.
What's it like personally for you to see the impact that you've had on people's lives?
I mean, you hope you're making an impact,
You
right?
are, yeah.
And you know, we take vows, right? Poverty, chastity, obedience. And so, you know, I think one of the things that I personally wrestled with entering the order, not getting married, not having children, is kind of losing that impact of not having your own kids.
Mm-hmm.
And I never fully anticipated the fulfillment that could come by serving in a community where you meet other people, students, people who are growing, that you get to walk with for a period of their life, or maybe all their life. To watch them, you know, as students, as children, as teenagers, as young professionals, as parents, as leaders of companies and coaches themselves, to watch them take those little seeds of values of veritas, unitas, caritas, gratitude, you know, forgiveness, service of others, to see them take that into this world that we all wish was a little bit more unified and a little more joyful and together, and to see them making that impact, and to think that you had a small role in that is incredibly gratifying. Mm-hmm. I think that's what we get in terms of our legacy, is the people that we serve with, the people on whose shoulders we stand, and hopefully the people that come after us that share that same spirit.
Yeah, it's wonderful.
You know?
It's funny, that's like, I get a little dose of that as a teacher on campus, as an adjunct professor. It's like I get to see the student from day 1 to week 15, to see somewhat of the development, but the most fulfilling part is to catch up with them afterwards when they graduate. And then you see the field that they went into, because you knew that naive kid from day 1, and they told you on day 1, I want to be, I'm this is my name, this is my year, and I'm going to be this. And then you see whether they found that or they found another love doing something else. And now it's like the first class I taught was 2013. And so now I see like they have kids and they're married, and it's like, oh, the most wonderful thing in the world. So I'm jealous that you get to do that full time.
And as you know, with the basketball program, I mean, so much of the defining of the person is around basketball, right? So, you know, you take, for example, like Randy Foye. You know, wow, he could score a lot of points. Well, he's a lot more than a person who can score a lot of points,
he is.
right? And as we know, I mean, he was a confident, strong man, maybe a man of few words when he first got here.
Yes.
And to see him now, you know, as a leader.
I just texted him this.
Right? As a spokesperson for the university, and as a father, as a husband, you know, as he works now, leads Friends of Villanova. You just see, I mean, all the gifts that he and these others have, and how they cultivate all sides of their mind, body, soul, and spirit, which is what we challenge them to do. And you hope that they do, and then you see it come into fruition, and it's really it's a beautiful thing to witness.
Absolutely. And because I think too, when people think about student athletes, they think, oh, all these guys are going pro.
Right.
And it's like, no, inevitably, 85% of the guys that come through there, they're not playing basketball, for long term after that. Maybe they are in Europe or overseas, but it's like, then you watch their transition, and then you really see, I think, what they learned in that program. Because you start to see some good people. You do. I ran into, I hosted the American Heart Association's Heart Ball. Ran into Shane Clark.
Oh, cool.
Which was great.
Oh, very nice.
And he was there with his wife, and just touching base with him, and to see how well adjusted he is, and how good of a father he is, and a good husband, and how successful he is too. I remember I lived with Kyle Lowry my junior year in Gowan Hall, and he was sleeping on the couch. Like that's the guy I remember. You know what I mean? Right. And now all of a sudden you see him do a big thing. You're like, wow, this is pretty amazing.
I know.
But the seeds were planted there.
Yeah.
And so it's so nice to see the journeys afterwards.
I think Kyle was like the man of the year in Toronto. He was like the citizen of the year.
We used to wonder where he was on the weekends. Like that's
exactly.
I think so. It was me, Mike Hall, and Ross Condon. So two student managers and a walk-on living with Kyle, and I think it was just to look after him. Really do. It was just to keep track of where he was, because he was pugnacious and incredible on the court. But his maturations is incredible.
Right,
to watch.
Same thing. Father, husband, captain.
Oh yeah.
A world champion.
Gives back to his community in a major way in North Philly.
Yes.
Giving back to his university in a major way. It's like all those things makes him a tremendous role model.
Spokesperson. Yeah. No, you're right. Makes us proud. Yeah.
Cool. Madonna brought up a really great point there. So I know you well as team chaplain, because that's how I met you, and how it's funny. Like most of my core memories and I've really developed in a major way with you those 4 years and afterwards. You've got this whole other side of you, the prior provincial. Tell me about that life. Tell me about we were talking before about time, and the time is short, and you also managed to have that, as we just joked, a part-time role, which is major.
No, thanks for asking. The role of prior provincial has been a wonderful honor for me to serve my brothers and our province and our order. And so in some ways, you get to act as the shepherd, if you will, to kind of shepherd the flock as we minister, and we serve in the various ministries that we have in the United States, up and down the East Coast. A lot of people might understand it a little bit more as the GM. It is a business. It's a nonprofit, but it is a business. And so there's personnel that we're concerned about, and helping to ensure that we're in the right spots, that we have the resources that we need in the various parishes and schools and missions where we serve. We have a delegation in Japan, and missions in Peru.
Wow.
And so it's really opened my eyes up to the ways in which we serve. And it's humbling to see the good work that our brothers do, that a lot of people would never know about. Lifelong teachers. We're talking about guys who have been ordained or professed in vows 40, 50, 60 years. Those who live in the monastery, some of them are in need of assisted living. Some of them are in need of acute medical care. Father Dennis McGowan is the prior here, and he keeps me abreast of the condition of the friars and what their needs might be. And so working with our various heads of school, working with our pastors. And so it's really been an opportunity for me to kind of spread my wings around the province a little bit more. But as we said earlier, it only cultivates the more relationships. I've really gotten to know a lot of our brothers, that have been in this maybe a lot longer than I have, and to learn from them, And so what I have is an opportunity to help promote our province, to support and ensure its sustainability into the future, and then hopefully make sure that our charism, our spirit, is touching people in meaningful ways. And so I'm grateful. I'm in my third year, so time's flying, and to be able to represent St. Augustine, the province of St. Thomas of Villanova, to partner with people who, like yourself, who like to help us, has been a really unexpected joy in my life. It's not a job that most people seek, so it kind of finds you, and but it's been a blessing.
Well, you're a great person for that role.
Thank you.
That's for sure. And it kind of leads us to Tolle Lege Day then too. It's like relates in a major way to the welfare of the friars, right?
It does. So Tolle Lege would be, if you translate the words, it would be take and read. And so that goes to Augustine's conversion story. When he heard those words, when he heard some kids playing in a park, and he picked up a Bible. And it was kind of a passage from Scripture that talked about maybe putting down old ways and picking up some new ways. And so it's a transformation story for Augustine, but it's a transformation that is an invitation to all of us, you know, to move to our better selves with God's grace. And so Tolle Lege Day is a day that Madonna Sutter and her staff, Sarah and Mary Ellen and Mary Catherine, really help empower the friars and those with whom we serve, to get the word out that hey, we're still here.
Yeah, and the role is very important
we're still recruiting, we're still teaching, we're still in parishes, we still want people to join us. And as we all know, that takes resources, right? You know, that we talked about the medical care of the friars, you know, friars who have given their whole life and are now, you know, unable to work, to keep them in community, that they can live their elder years in dignity, with peace and prayer with their brothers. That obviously takes resources. To educate our young men in theology, in formation, in the various places where we serve. And so these are the resources. We're very grateful for the generosity of people who have sustained us all these years. But as we know, it's kind of a lifelong endeavor. And so we talked a lot about culture, and we do think that the Augustinians have a lot to add to the culture of the world today, to ensure that values like veritas, unitas, and caritas never go out of style. And so we hope that for generations to come, that there will be Augustinians walking with people, helping people, healing people, teaching people, inspiring people to be their best selves. And so Tolle Lege Day is a way to invite people to help us do that.
That's great. That's great. And it's interesting too. Awareness is so important because it's rooted in humility.
Yeah.
It's not like you guys are advertising, you know, hey, I did this great thing today.
Right.
The whole point is to not do that and to form these friendships. So I think it is incredibly important that the impact that you guys have are amplified.
Thanks for saying that. I think it's our nature not to talk about ourselves.
Yeah, right.
And there are so many people doing incredible works that are not self-promoting that.
Right, right.
And at the same time, in order for people to know who you are and what you're doing, there are things like this to just help tell our story.
Really important. You mentioned, challenging times. We're a lot of people will describe these times now as challenging. How much more difficult is that role that the Augustinians serve in the community?
We are in challenging times, and Augustine would say the times have always been challenging. And so maybe the technology is different, maybe the news stories are a little bit different, but the challenges are very much the same. And so Augustine has this wonderful line, 1600 years ago when he was preaching. He said, "You say the times are troublesome, the times are burdensome, the times are miserable. The times never hurt anyone. Those who are hurt are human beings. Those by whom they are hurt are also human beings. So change human beings and the times will be changed. And so, look, we know what's going on in the stock market. We know what's going on in this generation of FOMO and anxiety and polarization and political divide and war and oppression. And unfortunately, that is very much part of the human condition. But as Augustinians, and you're in the business too, our call is to share the good news. That as human beings, we can offer forgiveness. We can pick people up when they're knocked down. We can offer encouragement to those who may be depressed and down and lonely. We can share our resources with those who are in need. And we can remind people that no one is on this journey by his or herself, no matter how difficult the times get. And so we are in the season of Lent. We happen to be in the season of Lent. That's a time in the desert. That's a time when everything isn't completely worked out. But what we believe is on the other side of that is Easter and the resurrection. And so we live in the hope and the light of that promise of resurrection. And if our lives can mirror that to people, that's a way that can keep people persevering through their hardship and challenges.
Oh, I love that. It's challenging as a journalist, because you want to, provide a service, and that service is being accurate and being timely and being forthright with people. But it's very, very challenging to relay these stories and wonder what the impact's going to be. Because talking about the stock market, I know people are going to hear it and get anxiety, and I don't like being the source of that.
Right.
It's always so tough, and so it's a constant balancing act every day to try to find a way to button up some of these stories with either a silver lining or to provide something to the end of it. And it's really tricky, and I love the role for that reason, because every day is different, and it's a crazy responsibility to get up there and to be on TV or write in a paper or whatever it is, broadcast it via radio or a podcast, which is why I enjoy teaching, because you can you have more time and you can control things and get that satisfaction on the back end. But it's really tricky and challenging. And I love doing the good news. That's why I love morning news. There's a lot of good news to share. Getting people up and, hey, it's going to be a great week. But it's you have to do the doom and gloom too, as some people like to call it. But it's tricky.
It is. And we talked about people who have gone through challenging times with a certain perspective. And that doesn't mean their life was perfect, but they are examples to us of resilience and perseverance that we need to share those stories. I was talking with the team over the week. We were out, and we obviously, everybody wants to win all their games.
Of course.
And then you don't. And then there's challenges, right? There's a sense of disappointment and failure, and what could I have done better? And anyway, we were talking. I was sharing with them that story, and you would remember it. Probably it might have been like 10 or 15 years ago. Remember when that Chilean mine collapsed?
Yes.
And those miners were down at the bottom. And what was interesting about the way the mine collapsed was it collapsed on top of them, but down below they were kind of in a bubble. And so they were down there, I think, for like whatever they were, a long time, right? Half a mile underneath the surface. And what happened was there was 33 of them. Their foreman broke them up into groups and shifts, and they kept working the mine. They kept on working. And so they kept their faith, they kept on working, and then ultimately there was people who finally, drilled a hole, and there was help, and then they finally came up, and they said, that we weren't 33 people down there, we were 34. Because we knew God was with us.
Wow.
And so there was kind of a faith-filled group down there that didn't just pack it in while they were down there. They continued to work, and they continued to keep the faith.
So purpose and hope. Wow.
And so I think sometimes in our own life, we were talking about treading water, maybe that's all you can do.
Right.
Is just try to, keep working as best as you're able, keep treading water, have people around you who are trying to do the same thing, keeping the faith, and you never know when the light's going to break back in again.
There you go.
You know?
Yeah.